Welcome to HirePHD's ACPSS YouTube series. I'm Divya and I'm the project manager at HirePHD. HirePHD is a nonprofit organization which aims to help advanced degree holders by providing them necessary resources for a successful career transition. Today, I'm very excited to be the moderator for today's ACPSS episode. ACPSS is short for Alternative Career Path Success Stories, which aims to expose our audience to the numerous career possibilities outside academia. ACPSS is one of the numerous initiatives by HirePHD to help advanced degree holders unlock their potential and navigate career paths. So please stay with us till the end and enjoy this conversation. Today, we have a very special guest with us, Melissa Ander. Melissa is a life coach who helps busy people stop trying to find time and learn to create time for themselves. Previously struggling with overworking and creating time for herself, since she found coaching, she's learned skills to create time for herself and create the life that she wants. For example, she created time to open her coaching business when she had 2 kids in daycare, was working full time and commuting 2.5 hours each day. She has shared these teachings with her clients and helped hundreds of people create more time for themselves to create what they want. Time to achieve their personal or health goals and time to support their mental and emotional health, or time to be present with their family. She also has 15 years of experience as a program manager who shepherded large research grants involving multiple institutes and investigators, garnering nearly $50 million in research funding. So, Melissa, welcome again. We are thrilled to have you as our guest today. Could you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, about your academic background, and how this career journey started?
My background is in molecular biology and genetics and science. So that's what I took in my undergrad. Then I did my master's of science in the lab medicine pathobiology department at Mount Sinai, University of Toronto. Started my PhD. And at that time, I wasn't sure about research. I had some questions based on my master's experience, wanted to give it another try. So I started my PhD and took a turn in terms of what the research project was like. So it was much more biology based versus my master's was very like a methods based, great master's project. And then I started my PhD at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, also with the University of Toronto Molecular Genetics Department, different department. Interesting about that experience was that everything was going really well. And I know most listeners are going to be PhDs, so that's unusual, right? When we're doing research, it's like everything was going splendidly. So my supervisor was amazing, super supportive, but not like micromanaging me. My lab mates were wonderful. We had a ton of fun in the lab, and even my project was going well. So I was doing like conditional knockouts and knock-ins for the lab's favorite protein at the time. And with my first experiment, everything worked. Like I had mice and everything worked. And I was like, everything's going really well. And yet I wasn't really enjoying it. And I was always looking for another path, another something else that would feel more aligned for me. Always on, at the time, I'm dating myself, so I'm 47. But at the time, it was Workopolis, which is like that day's LinkedIn version of LinkedIn, and looking for web postings of jobs. And I found this one that was in research communications, and it was about writing and science. That's for me. That's actually what I want to do. Is I want to write. Supported me to make the decision of leaving my PhD or quitting my PhD. Like I took my first turn out of science, at least out of research. And I remember talking to my supervisor, just saying like, I don't know if I'm going to get this job, but I think that's the direction that I want to go in. And I don't think I want to be in research. And I think like a lot of PhDs in the path as graduate students, we have those questioning, right? We're questioning like, am I on the right? And I think some of us question it at different stages, and some of us question it when we get out. And it happens in different ways for different people, but that was sort of the turning point for me. But I did get the job, so that was great. I told my boss, and he was wonderful because he was just like, you can stay as long as you want. And if it works out, great. If it doesn't, that's okay too. And it really gave me the opportunity to kind of relax into this idea of doing something different. And yeah, so then I started in research communications. So then in research communications, what that really means is I was working for a research institute, which was the University Health Network in Toronto, which is actually like multiple research institutes. But it was really writing about the research that was going on at the University Health Network. So promoting it, writing newsletters, writing for their intranet, internet, like stuff online, stuff like paper stuff, and I just loved it. I got involved in the American Medical Writers Association. I reconnected with my love of writing. I'd always loved to write, and when I went into undergrad, I kind of decided between doing English or molecular biology and genetics, which is so funny, right? It's like, and the reason I chose science was because I thought I would be more likely to get a job, which is also kind of funny once you're out and in it, versus having an English degree. I just couldn't put the pieces together at that age, at that time in my life. Like, what would I do with an English degree? But then they came together again, and I was doing a lot of writing and getting back into that. And then a part of that role also, so I was writing promotional about the research and promoting it at UHN, and it was also about writing grants. So what I would do is lead like the project, multiple investigators typically, and often multiple institutes, so highly complex grant opportunities that were sort of institutionally supported was the idea, so that busy PIs could sort of lean back a little bit, focus more on the science, and someone would do both all the administrative work associated with managing a project of that size, and then also writing and editing for it. So I did that as well as a part of that role. And then I worked with a scientist named John Dick in Toronto, and in that role, and he was like, this is fantastic, like this is way easier to do this kind of stuff with someone else that's basically in charge of like all of the moving pieces, and I can like go about my daily life as a scientist and have someone in this role supporting me. So he offered me a job and I took it. So that was my
Wow.
next stage. Yeah. So he offered me a job. He had an opportunity to direct a large cancer research program funded by the Ontario Institute for Cancer Research, at the time focused on cancer stem cells. And then he invited me to be the program manager for that project. So that was sort of why I was hired. We developed that program together, and then we started writing grants together, like for other program grants. So did many different ones for different granting organizations. And we have a really good track record, actually. I don't think John and I have ever not gotten a grant, which is pretty fun.
Wow.
Yeah, like with him as lead PI and me managing it. We are also discerning maybe in terms of like which grants we go for. So we go for one, and I really kind of operationalized a lot of the grant process to make it easier for him, but also like decision making, deciding which grants we're going to focus our attention on, opportunity versus cost. I really did a lot of bringing business into science for him. I had just my own personal interest in business and management and marketing and sales, and I was always trying to convince the scientist. Wasn't always well received. Sometimes was, sometimes wasn't. But there's a whole world of like being able to manage stuff and to bring it into science. I really started to see that as my role. And then another fun thing that started to happen, basically, so John and I, one of my prerequisites for coming to work with him, I was like, we're gonna meet every week. So if you're in town, we meet. And those meetings that we had really started to kind of be like a download from him about what was going on. And then I would kind of help him to organize his thoughts, make decisions, focus in on one thing versus another thing, be able to kind of take everything that was happening and help him, support him to take action in ways that were supportive to him. And I was describing this to some friends and how rewarding I was finding it. They were in the teaching or education field, so different kind of thinking. They were saying, I think you're coaching him. This is 15 years ago, right? I was like, coaching, like what that means exactly. And they were like, here's some books. And as you know, the good academic, I took all the books and read all the books, and then started to apply some of that with John. And he was like I remember I can still see him sitting in his office, and he was like, I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing this. This is really helpful. He's like, I can't put my finger on what is happening, but this is really helpful. And so
Hmm.
I kind of began to realize that there was a skill set that I had that I was completely unaware of, which I think is also relevant for your audience, right? It's like there's these things that we kind of take for granted about ourselves that come really naturally to us,
Yeah.
right? And maybe we don't have a name for it, or we're doing it and we don't realize it, And in reflection, I was like, I've been coaching my whole life. Like I was the kid on the playground that everyone used to come and talk to about whatever was happening for them. And I would just listen and maybe offer them guidance, like little, grade 7 Melissa, boys with different things happening for my friends. And like it evolved. So then in my role there, John was super supportive. I was very fortunate in that way. And he really helped me supported me to develop that skill. So I did all the work that I did around the grants. And then I also started coaching people in the lab, more directly coaching John about different things and really building and developing that skill. Got some training and that kind of thing as well at that time.
So
And
speaking about your
yeah,
skills, like you just
yeah.
mentioned that you did not even realize yourself that you were actually
Hmm.
coaching someone their job better. So, how did you
Yeah.
leverage your academic skills and knowledge that you have gained during your research years into this new role? Because you
Mm,
were a researcher before, and now you were managing grants and in communication. So, what were the key
yeah.
skills, the key transferable skills?
Oh, yeah, the great question. So I think the kind of obvious is maybe just project management. In the lab, you're managing your own projects all the time. You've got one thing running for 30 minutes and then you're going to do the other thing while you're waiting for that thing to incubate, and you're like doing all of that kind of work. And I think the project management aspect of the work that I did was just complete transfer of that skill, right? It's like I can manage projects in the lab, I can manage projects with 10 researchers and grants and stuff. I would say it's almost just like a different medium, right? So a lot of that work was writing and emails in the grants, communications, all of that kind of thing. But doing it in the lab is it's just organizing and coordinating and making sure that everyone kind of knows what's going on, right? It's very, very similar. Oh, the one way I really love to think about it is that, because I think what happens sometimes is when we take those turns, so I could have said to myself, oh, that was a waste. I did all of that time in my master's, or I did that time in science when I really wanted to write. That was a waste of time. But I just never say that to myself ever, right? Like a hard stop. Like there's just I don't allow it. And then it's like, but what I do say to myself about it, I know the language, right? Like I can sit in a room with 10 of the top scientists in Canada and know what's going on, like very easily, right? Whereas if I hadn't invested that time, even just being able to have a conversation and understand what's going on, I think we really don't value that enough in terms of that transfer of skill. It's a completely different language, right? Like we've learned and that we all speak in. We're in science, but we don't necessarily like credit ourselves with it because everyone knows the language, right? Because I would go to the American Medical Writers Association conferences, you meet some people that were in English and then coming to be able to do medical writing, and they're coming from the different direction, right? And I was always told myself and talked to myself that it's like it's easier to have the language in science and learn the English grammar and all the
Yeah.
things about communications that I can learn those now. I feel like that's way easier, right, than learning how to speak DNA or speak CRISPR or speak that we talk about, right? Things that come to mind in terms of
Thank you.
transfer
Thank you
skills.
so much for
Yeah.
sharing. Because, as you mentioned, I would just like to summarize that two main
Mhm.
skills that you have bring into light today. First is project management. Second is
Mhm.
that researchers know the language of science. And
Yeah.
both of these skills, all of the researchers, I believe, kind of underplay even when
Mm.
writing in their resumes. Because one of the reasons I can think of is because when we are in a lab setting, everyone knows the same thing. So we
Yeah,
are like, oh,
exactly.
maybe, yeah, right.
Yeah, we don't give ourselves credit for it, right? But it's like this whole body of knowledge that we have that we can like just walk up to someone and talk to them about their poster. Like it's a lot, right? Like that's the
Yeah.
thing. And I used to do that in my research communications or at events and stuff. And like that, you couldn't necessarily do that if you're coming from another field. I agree. I think we really
Yeah.
underplay it.
And like since you have experience both as a researcher and now writing about research and
Mhm.
handling grants. Could you share some insights into the differences between the academia and the non-academic part of the research that you must have experienced firsthand? Like what are the differences that you experience being a researcher and then being a project manager or a program
Mm.
manager for research and grants?
Yeah, so I would say I was really still in academia. So I'm working for a PI that is at a university, right? And at a research institute. Kind of funny because part of some of the reasons that I left academia or left that pursuit of that for myself, like becoming a PI, was because I didn't want to have the lifestyle of a PI, which from my observations at the time was work all the time basically and don't have weekends off and not see your kids as much as you would like to, and those things were like off the table for me. Those were part of the reasons that I left, but then I found myself in academia writing grants for someone else and working the same hours doing all of that. So it was kind of funny because there wasn't a lot of difference. And then that was actually part of, what engaged me in more self-help and coaching, like
Mm.
for myself, was like I am overworking. It's me. Like whether I'm in academia or whether I'm in this job, right? Like whether I'm pursuing becoming a PI or whether I'm writing grants for a PI, I'm still working my tail off here and I am at the root here. So I either need to like learn how to set some boundaries, which I did. I also learned more about time management, not take responsibility for everything, which I'm sure is a common thing among your people.
Oh my God,
Because
it's
you,
so difficult. It is
yes,
so
because,
difficult to, I mean, it's so difficult to let go because in
Mhm.
research, it's like it's your project, it's your
Yes,
responsibility. You
yes.
prepare the samples, you do the experiment, you do the analysis, you write the manuscript. So somehow it gets embedded that if I don't do it, it's not going to get done. So the pressure
Mhm.
keeps on building up.
Yes, exactly, right?
Yeah.
And what happened for me was that mindset just into the program manager. Mindset didn't change, and it wasn't until I realized like I'm a part of a team. Like
Hmm.
I'm a part of a team. It's not all on me. I literally had a PI say to me once after an event that he had mentioned something to me at an event that we ran for our research program. It was like our annual meeting, basically. Mentioned some detail to me. Like during the day, busy day, I'm at the head, right? Like me and the scientist were like, everyone's asking me questions, talking to me, all this stuff. And I email him the next day about that detail. And he emailed me back. He's like, you are the most responsible person I have ever met. All of that craziness,
Yeah.
there's like this small detail that he says to me, and it's in here. I remember and I do it because I believe that it's all on me and I have to do all of the things. And it's like that would used to really weigh on me a lot. And if you're holding all that stuff with you as you move through your work. So a lot of it for me was really learning how to set boundaries and understanding that I'm a part of a team, and especially with work with deadlines, right? Because you're working on a
Yes.
deadline, and this might be helpful to your people as working on deadlines and people not giving you the stuff until too close to the deadline. And then you work, like I had grants where I was literally working for 16 hours a day on the last 4 days because I was getting everything together, right? And that was like my bathroom floor moment. I was like, I'm never doing this again. I just won't. After that, I really learned how to be like, what I would say to people is, if you give me a month, I can give you this. If you give me
Hmm.
a week, then I'll give you this. I'll give you, or like X, Y, Z, right? If you give me 2 days, like I'm barely going to read through it. I'm going to maybe proof it and then submit it. And that's it. So then I learned how it was like, I can actually set these boundaries of like, you get best quality work when you give me a month worth of time. This is like the level of work. I will read it. I will edit it. I will make it amazing for you. You will be so happy with this grant. You give me a week, I'll read through it and give you some suggestions and then go back and forth. But if you give me 2 days, I'm literally going to proofread it. And because I used to do all the work that I would do for someone in a month, right? So it's like my own level of expectation. Yeah.
Yeah, so like you just mentioned a very important point about being a team player and how
Mm-hmm.
you are waiting till the end, till someone completes their stuff and give it to them.
Yeah.
So in
Yes.
this context, could you discuss the role of networking and the
Mm.
professional relationships that that kind of helped you, make this transition from being a researcher to now being a program manager, and from a
Mhm.
program manager to a life coach. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah. So
mean,
I think it's more applicable for me from going to a program manager to a life coach because I really didn't network before then, before I went into business. Like making the transition, as I shared, from research to program manager was very happened. Like I worked for John and then he offered me a job. That was where I was for a very long time. But when I decided to open my business, then it was kind of funny actually, because what was recommended to me was to like write up what I wanted to do, like how I wanted to help people on a piece of paper and share it with people. Little did I know that was networking. Like that's it. That's all you're really doing. So it's like I had a list of all my people that I already know, reached out to them. I said, I'm doing this new thing. I want to talk to people about it, see if you know anyone that fits this description. Basically, this is who I'm looking for. And I still do that in my business. It's still how I find people to help. And that was really it. And so I think the same, and I say this to my clients if they're in the position of looking for work or a transition in their career, is to just have that description and be really clear about what you want. I'm actually working with someone on this right now. Be really clear about what you want and just start sharing it with others, because then it not only gets your mind working on it and like more clarity for you, and the more clear you are in general, the more likely you are going to find it. When you meet with other people, it's just really sharing what you're looking for and saying, have you heard, do you know anyone that does this kind of work, or someone that might be able to help me learn
mhm.
more about this, asking those kind of questions. Like that's how I got my first clients for sure. That was really how it all started happening. And I think it's the same for transitioning in your job. It would be very, very similar. And then I kind of realized like I actually really like networking. I didn't realize I was doing it. Like a really fun part of business is just connecting with people, getting to know other people better. And it gave me an excuse to like reach out to all of the people that I know and just reconnect with them if I hadn't talked to them in a while, or even people that I was close to and talking to all the time would do the same thing. Does
Yeah,
that
that's
answer your
that's
question?
great. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. Networking is important, as you mentioned, and how you navigated through it. Transition from your research background to program manager and then to your coaching business. Could you maybe highlight some benefits or opportunities that arose from this transition that you took? Anything different that you might want to share with us?
Like the benefits and opportunities of making those changes? Oh my gosh, that's a big question. Like I've never looked. Quitting my PhD was one of the best things I ever did. And because I choose to think about it that way, or leaving academia might be a different way for where your people are at. And I think the big thing for me was I really realized that when I started being around people that were really into it and did really want to stay in academia. And I was like, oh, I am not like that. Like I was the person that would 20 articles printed out in her backpack every night, take them home on the subway, never read them, never, and bring them back the next day. And I think it's the benefits to me are like just being more aligned with who I actually am, what's true for me, what I really enjoy, where my enthusiasm lies. There is nothing to me more beneficial than that. Being able to be in alignment with who you feel you truly are, like what your strengths are, what you believe in. It feels fantastic. I just feel like making those moves. And I think the key really is to follow your enthusiasm. And that's challenging, right? It's not necessarily like super obvious all the time. And if you're kind of
Yeah.
stuck, stuff, right? It's like trying some different stuff or think, how can I think about this differently? What might I move into?
Talking about the challenges, of course, as you mentioned, this journey has been totally rewarding to you,
Yeah.
and you have never looked back, and that's great. But I'm sure you must have faced some
Oh,
challenges while you were making these transitions. So yeah, we
yes,
would
of
like to know
course.
about them too. Like, what were the
Yeah,
challenges
absolutely.
that?
I think the challenges were for me were as I described a bit earlier about the overworking. I think I I thought that leaving academia would solve that problem for me, and it didn't. That for me was a big challenge to overcome, working to please others and working to look a certain way, working when I didn't want to work, like all of that, working so I could feel like I was really earning it. Letting go of all of that was definitely challenging. Like I talk about it easily now, like we do most challenges, right? Once we've been through them. But at the time, it was very challenging for me. And I think it was disappointing, right? Because I thought that I would, by leaving that trajectory, I would solve that problem. And I didn't. So it was like the personal growth that was required for me to move out of that stage of really looking for external approval, external validation, and really find that within myself first was the challenge and the opportunity. And I would say, like, going into coaching, I mean, challenges, there's all sorts of challenges going into running your own business. The challenges that I would say were initially for me was really understanding that I had something valuable to offer was actually a big growth step for me. So, like, I remember when I gave my first talk on how to make writing easier, and that was one of my first talks as a coach, I would say, having people come up to me after and saying how it was so beneficial to them and it was so worthwhile and really thanking me. And in my mind, because I wasn't valuing my own work, I was thinking, like, oh, they're just being nice. It's just because they've known me for so long that they're saying that, right? It's just because we're friends. That it wasn't really that big of a deal. So that was my first step of growth, was really understanding that I was diminishing my own, I don't want to say my own value as a person, but my own value that I have to contribute, right? Based on, at the time, it was like 10 years of experience writing and implementing these grants. And I was hoarding it basically because I didn't have the belief what I had to share was valuable. So that was one of my major growth steps, was just sort of moving through that so that I could start sharing what I did know and helping people as coach beyond the role that I was working in as program manager, and giving talks and doing all of that, going to universities and like getting paid to do that. I was like, really? We're going to pay me? Like, that's so fun. The first time I was like surprised that someone offered to pay me. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. It's just because you don't believe in it for yourself. And so that was really a ton of my work initially, is really believing in the value that I had to contribute. I would say that was one of the major challenges. And then business is just learning how to like run a business. That's a thing. You have to learn how to, that is like the marketing and the sales. And which it turns out, because as I was sharing earlier about how I was like always trying to convince the scientists, like, hey, we're actually like grants are actually, we're marketing and we're selling, like that's what we're doing here, right? Like maybe we can use some of the information that we know about marketing and selling and apply it to grant writing. And so now I'm like, oh, I don't have to convince anyone anymore. I just get to like do marketing, I get to do sales, like I get to do all of that in my business. So that's been fun. In the last few years, I've really been able to like reignite that for myself. That was like, oh, this is actually something that I just really enjoy. But it's all full of challenges too. Like just, the first LinkedIn post, or like first time you're like putting something out there and you're worried about what others might think or say, and like learning that just moving through all of those challenges too. There's so many challenges, but those are the few that come to mind.
Yeah, thank you
So
for
much
sharing,
growth.
because, yeah, I mean, as you just mentioned, that the challenges were always there, but you worked through them. So while
Exactly.
you were working through these challenges, now looking back, is
Mm.
there any advice you wish you had received, or any actions you would have taken differently to make your
Mm.
transitions even smoother for you?
It's also how I've trained my brain to think about it. But it's like, I really feel like I wouldn't have, so my master's experience, if my master's experience had have been fantastic, like I might have taken like a totally different turn. So because I did the PhD and because I had that I just feel like it all kind of happens the way that is going to benefit you the most. I believe that there isn't really anything that I wish that someone had advised me to do it a different way. What I would say is there wasn't anyone advising me to do this or that. Does that make sense? So it's like I didn't really have someone saying, "Oh, yeah, like go off, quit your PhD and go off in this adventure of writing. That sounds like a good idea." Like no one was saying that to me. And also no one was saying to me like go start a life coaching business. Like that's a good idea. Like I'm sure that's going to work out well. Like no, that did not happen. So, and the reason I share that is because it's like sometimes what's inside of you is not going to match up with what other people think and what other people are expecting from you. The only way to really begin to feel aligned in your own life is to like start to do some of those things that you're just doing for you. I remember off my first year having my business, and I think by the end of my first year, I think I had maybe 4 or 5 clients. I was talking to my dad about it, and I just started crying because I was like, I created this. I did this. Like no one told
Oh.
me to do it. It wasn't like a test. It wasn't, an expectation of society, like to go to school, to get married, to have kids, like all of those things I wanted, but they're also like aligned with our societal expectations, at least in the US and Canada, and or Western living, however you want to describe that, but developed countries in the world. Like when you do something that's kind of like aligned for you, but it's not aligned for what's outside of you, there's a different feeling when you do that. You're doing it just because you wanted to versus you feel because someone told you to or because you had to. You felt like you had to. It's very different.
This turned out to be so much philosophy.
Welcome.
Yeah,
Welcome to a conversation with a life coach.
but I really appreciate you sharing all this. That gives us a different perspective. Sometimes we are also like stuck. So I think so. Since we are in this philosophical talk, would you
Sure.
like to discuss or share about your life or your career as a life coach?
Yeah. Oh, so life coaching for me is like being able to do breakthrough on purpose, overcoming limiting beliefs on purpose, changing your perspective in life that's holding you back on purpose. If you're like when someone's feeling stuck, it's like figuring out why and helping them see that and then giving them the option of continuing that or doing something else. And for me, it's just a complete honor and privilege to be doing this work with people. I'm working with a client right now who is focused on changing her relationship with overwhelm. So she gets very overwhelmed at work and at home as well. She's just completely changing her relationship with it. And I had a call with her this morning, and it's gonna totally change her life. And you can just see it. I think as coach, it's like you're watching it, you're the observer, and you can really just see how this is going to completely change her life. Overwhelmed. I get overwhelmed in a joyful way about it because it's like there's nothing to me. There's nothing that I would rather be doing than be witness and be a part of that process for someone and be the catalyst. Really, that's really what a life coach is a catalyst for change. It's like they make change easier.
Very, very beautifully said. And yeah, I mean, it's amazing to hear from a scientist,
I know, right? And it's
from
like,
a
yeah, and
researcher.
yeah, and I think too, like it's an analytical mind. I'm just analyzing. Like I have such an analytical mind in that and in those calls, I basically am just analyzing someone's thought and understanding their thoughts and their feelings and their behaviors, showing them what's happening and getting really curious about them. Curiosity is huge in life coaching. Analysis is huge in life coaching. In running a business, like, I'm just going to make some parallels here with science in case it's, something that somebody wants to consider pursuing. And I'm, of course, happy to talk to anybody about pursuing a career as a life coach. But it's really like business itself is also an experiment, totally an experiment, because you basically interacting with the world, you make an offer, basically, like this is what I can help you with. And then you're testing it like an experiment, like whether there's a response to that offer or not, like whether that is something that someone wants or doesn't want or values, right? And if they don't want it, then that's like your result that you get from your experiment. And if they do want it, that's also a result that you get from your experiment. So much more. This has actually been like a huge mindset change for me, is that because an academic mindset is very like looking for the right answer before you even start test taking and knowing that there is a right answer. In business, it's like you can't know what the right answer is. It's an experiment. It's very much like research. It's just like, because you can't know because you don't know, the variables are the other people involved, right? So it's like you put it out there and they might be interested, they might not be interested. It's like when you do, or like in a smaller scale, it's like you write a post and like nobody likes it or 50 people like it. It's like, I have no idea. And it's sort of just like, it's all an experiment, right? You kind of work with it that way. And so I do like to think about that now, like that parallel for myself is really that it is an experiment. And, you know, right now I've got I got stuff cooking in the incubator. I got stuff like that I like, ideas that I've captured that I want to do experiments on, that that we do when we're working on research projects. We're like, oh, here are 10 things that we're going to do next while we're focused on these 3 experiments. It's literally what I'm doing right now, and so there's absolutely parallels to draw.
Since you drew this parallel for us, in any experiment there are challenges. So what are the challenges that you face as a life coach in this business of yours?
One of the challenges for me has really been learning how to manage, and this is such a life coach answer, it's like learning how to manage my own emotions. If I have a consult with someone and they say no, and like not making it mean that like I'm a terrible coach and they don't want to work with me, right? And being able to, just like if you in science, if you gave a talk and like no one asks any questions and you just sit down, right? Like all the emotions that come up in that moment, and you're just like, well, maybe that was good, maybe that wasn't good. Like, I'm not sure, right? It's the same thing in business. It's like you have an experience, right? And you're like managing the emotions of that experience. Or like right now, I'm really working on setting big goals in my business. I move forward because the goal is big. I'm not there yet. Like managing the emotions of what comes up as I make my way there, and like learning how to really connect in with the progress I am making. It is actually, I'm making lots of parallels. I can see it's very similar to research, right? It's like if you have an experiment that's cooking for 6 months, you don't know what the result is, and you're like waiting. It's like so much work that you've put in over time. You get the result and it wasn't what you were expecting. It's the same kind of thing in business. It's like so that's a transferable skill too. Like if you've learned how to manage that emotionally in research, then that you'll be able to transfer into business or entrepreneurship for sure.
Thank you so much for sharing, especially the parallels, because I believe our
Yeah.
audience would be able to connect with these parallels in a better way, and also for sharing the transferables. So before we go, please, do you have a take-home message for our audience or anything that you would like to share?
Yeah, I think when it's like looking for an alternative career, right? And looking for like what's your path. The thing to remember is that, and it sounds kind of cheesy, but it is your path. And I think it's not unique to research. Like there's many careers out there that are windy. The path, like, when you talk to people, I do a lot of networking, and when you talk to people, there's lots of different ways to get from A to M, right? In terms of your career. That's really the thing to remember. At the end of the day, for me, it's like aligning yourself with what feels good for you, where your strengths are, where your enthusiasm lies. All of those things have benefited me in order to create the life that I really want. Just remember that we're here to have a good time. I think that's it. We're here to have a good time. Part of our role on the planet, right? Like I want to help people and have some fun. Like do something that you enjoy, right?
Thank you so much, Melissa, for sharing your career journey and for sharing your experience as a life coach with us. I'm sure our viewers are going to enjoy this and appreciate all the wisdom that you have shared with us today. Thank you again.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
If you like today's episode and want to hear about more career journeys, please click like and subscribe down below. We'll be back with more educational and informative videos to help you with your career transition. Thank you so much.